I know you're probably all sick to the back teeth of chunk loaders, but what I have for you today is the final instalment in the epic chunk loader saga. Now this fixes practically all the flaws of any previous chunk loaders I've shown you in the past have had. So what we have here is a big grid of chunks. They've been colour coded. The ones with the S's are spawn chunks. So credit to the TheDukeofSpoons for actually letting me know about this, but this is actually extremely straightforward and doesn't require any redstone whatsoever. So this actually uses hoppers like the first chunk loader I showed you did. So it turns out that it actually only requires one hopper. So what you need to do is you need to place a hopper in a chunk such as this one, and it needs to be facing into another chunk like this, so on the chunk border, just one. So the way this actually works is we're kind of smearing the spawn chunks. In a way, these chunks actually become some pseudo spawn chunks. I'll get to that in a minute. But basically what you want to do is, like I said, smear them. So you go from the spawn chunks, so this is one chunk, and you take the hopper and you direct it into another chunk. So if this is a pseudo spawn chunk, then you can actually repeat the process into another one, and so forth, all the way up to an outcropping over there. So at the end of the route, what we're going to do is we're going to actually spread all of these pseudo spawn chunks out. So to do that, all we do is take this one, or wherever the last in the line is, and we actually just spread it out horizontally this way. And to do that, you just have to direct a hopper into the chunk, obviously, and do it all the way up to there. And like this, basically what we can do is we can actually just repeat what we were doing earlier and just direct them in a straight fashion. This, in my opinion, seems to be the most efficient way of going about doing it. So these pseudo spawn chunks technically aren't at their fullest potential just yet. What I mean by that is they can process things such as player controlled block updates like Redstone, but they can't process entities, which is a big downside. However, there is a way to create entity processing pseudo spawn chunks, and it's actually really simple to do. All you need to have is a 5x5 grid of regular pseudo spawn chunks, and if you do that, the center one will actually become an entity processing pseudo spawn chunk. So just that one, but you can actually increase that. So if you actually increase the border, so instead 7x7, you'll actually receive a 9x9 area of these pseudo entity processing spawn chunks. So if the bigger the border is, basically the bigger the actual cube is, the more entity processing chunks you're going to get. So surely you have noticed the choo-choo spam that you've been receiving on the screen. So basically what we have here is a massive grid of 9x9, that's 81 entity processing pseudo spawn chunks. That's too long to say. But the grey ones are the regular ones, and the green ones are the entity processing ones. So all of these green ones can actually process entities as if they were spawn chunks. So there's a track here going with a minecart going around in circles, which goes choo-choo every couple seconds. So I've already demonstrated this, but let's show you again anyway. If we run really far away, then you'll see that it's still spamming with choo-choo. But the great thing about this is it actually fixes a problem that all the other ones had, and this is what I was talking about earlier. So basically before, if you basically activated those spawn chunks and then entered them and then left them, they'd actually deactivate, and that was a big problem. But that doesn't happen here. So we can actually go any distance we like away from those, but they'll still be loaded. Okay, so if we go 500 blocks away, they'll still be loaded, and we can enter them, leave them, and they'll stay loaded. But the great thing here is I can actually log out, log back in, and you'll see that it's still working. So I don't need to be in spawn chunks for those to start working again. You can just log out and log in, and those chunks are still loaded, and I think that is an absolutely fantastic feature of this particular design. So how much does this cost then? Well, it obviously requires hoppers, which require iron, which isn't the easiest item to get, but there are iron farms which can produce iron for free for you. So basically it breaks down to this. Now, excluding the route to the big chunk of spawn chunk loaders, for one entity chunk loader it costs about 145 iron pieces, not including wood. For 9 it costs 31, and these are per chunk by the way, so for one entity chunk it costs 145. For 9 it costs around 31 iron, 25 it costs around 89 per chunk, and 49 it costs around 39. So the more of these entity chunks that you actually have, the cheaper. Well, it's not that it gets cheaper, but the cost of each entity chunk being loaded gets cheaper the more you have. So obviously if you just have one, it's going to seem quite expensive, but if you have 49, then it seems like quite a good deal, in my opinion. So to summarise, I believe this is the best and most efficient chunk loader currently in the game. It is very straightforward to build, it requires no redstone knowledge or circuits, the chunks are constantly loaded, and it's even logout proof.